Namaskar. Welcome to Prakash on Basics. I'm Prakash Zo. We've talked of Jainism and Buddhism, but then while Jainism and Buddhism and other forms that we talked of previously were gaining popularity in this subcontinent, what was happening to Hinduism in general? Uh, had it lost ground? Had it reduced? Had it become extinct? Not at all, because it had a very large amount of inertia and there was a mass following for Hinduism too. Uh, it also had a very distinct nature of its own. We need to understand this concept also. All religions are man made. That's a fact. We can't deny it. Major religions are of two types: those with a single source or a proponent, and those with multiple sources. Um, One category in this is what is typically referred to as the Abrahamic religions, started by Ibrahim or Abraham, uh, Middle East area. Judaism was the first one, followed by Christianity and Islam. These are all Abrahamic religions. Uh, then there is Buddhism, Confucianism, Nanak, uh, the religion started by Zarathustra, that is the Parsi religion, and the Jainism, of course. Um, Out of these, some have been improved by the next gen people also. Um, for example, the Jains had successive Tirthankars who contributed, and the Sikhs, of course, had gurus. Guru Govind Singh Ji started the Khalsa sect, which is also a part and parcel of Nanak's following, slightly modified. That's all. So there could be multiple contributors in some cases. And Hinduism, uh, it had multiple sources, multiple contributors, multiple scriptures, and it was spread over multiple millennia. The Western concept of religion is totally different from the Indian concept of dharma. This I have discussed in detail some time back. But there are some key strength areas of Hinduism that we must talk of. Um, Hindu religious thinkers, pontiffs, were willing to change. There was no adamance. They were willing to change for the better. Introspection was a part of the religious gurus in India. They were willing to discard mistakes and they were willing to accept new good ideas. Hinduism was willing to adjust and modify itself as per the social changes and trends. Hindu masses too were gradually capable of accepting these changes and they did incorporate them into their daily lives and rituals also. Um, the terminology in terms of religious words often remained the same, but the meanings were modified to a very large extent. Dharma, yajna, runa, bhakti, etc. I'll go into details of this as and how we proceed along this path. And these changes had started not overnight, right from the beginning, from the Vedic period itself, where the beginnings of the Jnana Kand, that is the Aranyaks and the Upanishads, had started. So the change was there all along. Um, just to recapitulate, from nature gods, there was a shift to social gods like Vishnu and Shiva and Lakshmi and Kuber, and even human ideals like Ram and Krishna were accepted as gods. Uh, and also, during this span of over a couple of thousand years, there were other texts other than Vedas, and they were equally important. Um, they were related to the Vedangas that we talked of: Chanda, Nirukta, Jyotish, Shiksha, Vyakaran, and probably the most important one, which was the Kalpa. The These were typically referred to as the Kalpa Sutras. They were linked to ceremonies and sanskaras. For each Ved, uh, there were Shrauta Sutras, that means related to Shrutis, that is the Vedas. And these were named after specific people who proposed them. These were, of course, rishis. Um, Ashwalayan for Rigved, and Shaunak, and Laktyayan, and Manav, and Kaushik, and Bodhayan, and so forth. And then there was the Shulba Sutra, uh, how the yajna altars were designed, measurements were made. The Pythagoras theorem was talked of even then, including all the formulas that we know of. Pythagoras is much, much later. This is prior to 800 BC. Then there were the Dharma Sutras, which had the behavior rules, the duties, the laws, the customs, the rituals. Um, these were all typically referred to as the Smruti Granthas. They were next in authority to the Vedas. More than 50 of these treatises were around. Um, Smruti, because they were more out of memory and their authors were very specific. Originally, they were associated with 18 rishis, but then there were some that were extremely dominant. The Yajnavalkya Smruti, the Manu Smruti, which is very popular, the Narada Smruti, the Gautam Smruti, and so many. Then came the next set of texts for which I had talked of some time back, the Puranas, the 18 main Puranas and the 18 Upa Puranas, consisting of close to about 5 lakh independent shlokas or couplets advising on so many different areas. I've already discussed those, so let's not go into those again. Then, of course, there were the two major epics. They influenced the human society, the Hindu society to a very large extent, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. It also includes Gita and the Harivansh in its last section, which is referred to as the supplement or the Khila Parva. Uh, all these form the basis of the religious concepts at that time. They all set up the ideals and the norms for people to live. So the Dharma then was based on Shruti, Smruti, and the Puranas. It was typically referred to as Shruti, Smruti, Puranokta, the one that is mentioned in these three. Then came an all encompassing word for all the religious formats that were there. And it is known even today as the Sanaatan Dharma. That came to the forefront. It included the Vedic Dharma, the Puranic Dharma, the Bhagavad Dharma, and all the sects and the panthas like the Shaiva, Vaishnava, Saura, Ganpatya, Shakta, and many other subsects also. All these are generally referred to as the special form, which is the one that I now call and talk of as the Sanatana Dharma. But then that itself is what Hinduism really is. So when we talk of this Hinduism term, we are really talking of the Sanatana Dharma. The word Sanatan comes from Santati. That means the one that is continuous, whose origin and whose end are untraceable, as old as you can imagine. So it actually precedes even the Vedic Dharma, the time man began to think beyond survival, when self imposed laws were developed. Crude animism and nature worship dominated in that early span. The logic then was pretty simple. Whatever fostered and aided human life was treated as God. These were to be prayed, they were to be pleased, they were to be enhanced and looked for, like the sun, the trees, the rivers, the mountains. And then came the stage of personification also. Rain was treated as God, and then it was called as Agni, sorry, as Indra, and then later on another one which was Agni. So these were the human forms that were given to gods. And like all other religions, Mother Goddess was also treated with prime importance in Hinduism. It was a major aspect as the Shakti or the divine uh, womanhood that was talked of. And then whatever was harmful to the humans was to be treated as evil. These were referred to as the demons, typically as the Rakshasas or the Daityas. These had to be eliminated by using our good powers, is what was believed. And then um, came the Vedic span. We've talked of a lot of Vedic issues in the beginning. Um, this was followed by the developments that started taking place in the form of the texts and other informations that I talked of. This typically then is what is the Pauranic Dharma. And there's social, economic, political, various aspects influence religion at that time. And this was reflected in the Puranas, and this became the Pauranic Dharma, something that I'm going to come to immediately after these sessions. Um, the religion then took up a form that was quite convenient for the people. It was not as complicated and restricted to a few as in the Vedic Dharma. It became simple, acceptable to common man, to be practiced as and how possible by the common man. And this was the modified form of the Sanatana Dharma. Then what about Hinduism? The word Hindu is not in the Vedas, but there are multiple interpretations attached to this particular word. Um, let us look at all the good, simple possibilities associated with the word Hindu. And the most common is that the Persians and the kingdoms beyond refer to all the people beyond on or the east of Sindhu as Hindu because they pronounced Sa as her. And so Sindhu became Hindu, and all the people beyond the Indus or the Sindhu River were referred to as Hindus. This is a very common interpretation that is often talked of. But then, as time progressed, people hunted around for the reasons that referred to Hindu word, and there were some traces found at other locations also. There is one. I'll refer to two or three of them, which is quite interesting. Uh, one of them says, "Hinam dushayati iti Hindu." The people who are always ready to discard lowly things in words, in thoughts, in actions are the ones are to be treated as Hindus. Very interesting. And later on, one of the Smrutis, because the Smrutis kept on developing for a very long period. Um, there's a word that is often talked of, which is known as Asetu Himalaya, starting from the Himalayas to the oceans. The Bay of Bengal was referred to as the Ganga Sarovar. The Arabian Sea was referred to as the Sindhu Sarovar. And the Indian Ocean that we know of today is was referred to at that time as uh, Hindu Sagar. So these were the words that were originally to define the borders of a nation which was supposed to have been created by the gods. And all the people living in this area were believed, were accepted to be Hindus. There's one more very interesting meaning that we can come across. The word Hindu can be split up into her and Hindu. The word her is associated with the sun, and Hindu is associated with the moon. And the two most dominant dynasties in India of all the rulers were what were referred to as the Surya Vangsha, the ones originating from the sun, and the Chandra Vangsha, the ones originating from the moon. They were the ones who ruled lands, and these lands are the ones that are referred to by their combination, the word Hindu. Sun family is where Ram comes from, and the Chandra family is from where Krishna comes from. So even the lords and the gods were a part and parcel of this concept. And then when I talk of Sanatana Dharma, the word Dharma obviously is along with it. I have talked of the concept of Dharma in detail, say a couple of months back. But there are some concepts that I must add on because they are also from the later period. Because as the concept of what Sanatan Dharma was to widen the idea of what Dharma was, uh, there were new ideas that were introduced. By the time of Shankaracharya, it became an all encompassing religion and a concept of Dharma. It was beyond the Western concept of religion by all limits. Uh, One of the texts known as the Nyaya Sutra defines dharma as yat vikasyate iti dharma, that which develops and improves is dharma. So it talks of improvement of all, oneself and everyone around you. And then Shankaracharya himself, the great uh, sage of all times, defines dharma in two different ways. Uh, this is from his Shankara Bhashya, his commentary on Gita. Prior in that initial part, he talks of uh, the concept of dharma as uh, Jagat Sthiti Karanam iti dharma. Here, the word sthiti actually deals with not just stable part, but it deals with all the three aspects, that is the origin, sustenance, and culmination. And so, that which is the origin, sustenance, and culmination of the whole world around us, the rules that govern it, is what dharma is. Seemed to be a bit difficult. So he came up with a more expanded comment. And it says, Praninam Sakshat Abhyuddha Nishreyas Hetu Yah Saha Dharma. Dharma is that which causes and helps every living being to exist in its best possible way. Abhyuday implies beautiful, satisfying, fulfilling, uh, a life of ultimate achievements. If you look at this definition of what Sanatana Dharma is and Dharma itself is, friends, what could be better than this to define the religion that we need to follow? So the Dharma deals with the Sanatana Dharma, in fact, deals with duties, with natural laws, with the ideal way of living, the way to the pinnacle of self development. This is what Sanatana Dharma is. Collectively, this is what the West calls the term Hinduism. And for us, it's an ideal way of living. Sanatana Dharma, as I said, has its own subparts. After Vedic period comes the Puranic Dharma, and then the Bhagavad Dharma, and so forth. I'll talk of them as I proceed along this track next time onwards. If you have liked whatever I have said, please pass on this information to the others. Realize the great strength of what the Sanatan Dharma really is. try to incorporate it in your own lifestyle. Till I move on to the Puranic Dharma next time. Namaskar.